C&C Auto Show. I'm Aaron Clements here with co-host Jamie Bridges.
Good morning.
Jamie, we're on the road again.
We're on the road again.
Yes, we are. We're on remote at Blue Automotive in Augusta, Georgia, and we have several guests here with us today. We have David Clark of Kendrick Paint and Body and Blue Automotive. And welcome to the show, David.
Thank you, Aaron, for having us.
All right. And we have Chris Chesney here. He's Vice President of Training and Organizational Development at Aztec.
Hi, Aaron. How are you doing?
Welcome to the show, Chris. And we have Mike Reynolds. Now, Mike's getting to be a regular on the show here. He was here a few weeks back when we had a remote over at the it was a Marriott hotel for the SASA event. That was a lot of fun. And he's president of Mobile Automotive Service Solutions, or MASS, located in Charleston, South Carolina. Mike, welcome back to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me back. It's an honor.
All right. And again, we're live on remote at Blue Automotive, located at 1253 Green Street in Augusta, Georgia. And you're welcome to stop by and join us if you're nearby. If not, we will bring the show to you. And you can watch, listen, and post questions at ccautoshow.com. The video's on the home screen, and there's a chat bubble just to the right. If you're looking at the video, go over and click that chat bubble if you have a question, and you can ask a question, and Jamie will be monitoring those questions. And she's ready, sitting on go, and she'll let us know, and she'll read your question on the air, and we will answer it. If you want to direct it to a certain person, you can do that. You can also call the show. That's at 800-224-9090. We'll answer the phone, and you can ask your question to the person that you'd like to ask a question to. And, of course, you can watch us at facebook.com/CC Auto Show. We won't be monitoring any questions or anything on that. Today, we'll share information and answer questions on advanced driver assistance systems. And I'm telling you, on vehicles today, that is a big deal. It is a big deal. It has to do with safety. It has to do with driving comfort, and it's things that there's a lot of dollars involved in that system on keeping it safe. So you want to make sure that everything is correct and you know the right questions to ask. But also during this show, this will be something a little different than we normally do on the C&C Auto Show. We're going to pull back the curtain just a little bit. We're going to let you know some of the challenges that we go through as an industry on how to handle this type technology, because it has to be repaired. All this stuff, if it has problems, it's got to be repaired. It's sometimes recalibrated. So it's a lot of technology, and it has to be handled correctly. And that's what we want to do today, is we want to come up with solutions and ideas on things that we can do to make it handled more smoothly than it is. It already does good, but we all want to make it a lot better. So let's get started. This group's a discussion group here that we have. This is not a interview or anything like that. It's more of a discussion, and we don't do that many of those on the C&C Auto Show. Usually we're interviewing somebody or we'll ask questions, but this time it's more of a discussion. So if I ask one person a question and someone else wants to jump right in there, go ahead. Just answer the question. Also, if you have trouble merging in, just hold up one finger and boom, I'll make sure you get in there. Okay, we will start. David, welcome to the show again, and we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about ADAS and Collision Repair Shop's role in repair and recalibration.
So, ADAS, Advanced Driver Safety Systems, Assisted Systems. You got your front radar, your windshield camera, blind spot, park sensors, everything that makes it easier to drive a car today, that everybody gets used to. Well, when you get in an accident, that really sends the car into a frenzy, right? And you don't think about the things that just get set off from an accident, or even from taking something apart. It could be front bumper, that the park sensor is being replaced. I had a friend the other day that tried to replace his own park sensor and unplugged the camera and the front radar, and then he got back in his car, and it just locked it up. So, that's what we're seeing more of in collision. And I think for the consumer, the biggest thing is to ask those repair shops as you go in there, have you looked at that? Is that part of your repair process? Are you looking for those calibrations that need to be done?
Fantastic. Mike, tell us briefly about your company, MASS, and its role in repairing and recalibrating ADAS.
Yeah, so we go to collision shops just like David's in South Carolina, of course, and we are going to not just calibrate ADAS systems, but we're going to do electrical diagnostics and programming, a variety of other services as well. For us, it's a specialty service. There's a lot of special tools involved and a lot of things that most collision shops really aren't prepared to handle. And us being a technology specialist, that's kind of where we fill that gap. We come in, bring the tooling, and make sure that that vehicle's safe. As David alluded to, these are components that are driving the vehicle, right? So that little radar on the front bumper of the vehicle, that's in control of the braking and acceleration of the vehicle. And so calibration is critical. That's why this is so important.
And you've got a whole fleet of vans, yep. And these vans are just filled with technology. It's a beautiful sight, really. I love looking at those. I had the opportunity to see one of the vans, and it's just amazing. And they're able to bring a lot of this recalibration items to the repair facility to get the work done, because many times it's difficult for some collision shops. Not every collision shop's either able to invest in the equipment, manpower, or technology that it takes to do this, and being able to pick up the phone and say, hey, I need this done is very helpful for a lot.
Yeah. It's
okay. It's what?
I was going to say it's a special set of skills. It's new. So it's a unique niche in the market that not a lot of people are familiar with.
Yes, it is. Okay. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, we're glad to have Aztec join us to discuss the current industry issues and what role does Aztec play in the collision repair process.
Well, when safety systems started being applied to the vehicles back in about 2005, somewhere in there, I can remember standing at a ASA show in Chicago and listening to the collision industry sit around experts on a panel and talking about scanning vehicles and repairing vehicles with codes and safety systems. This is long before ADAS. ADAS is really just a marketing term that we've used to wrap kind of a wrapper around all these safety systems to put a term to it. And I can remember standing in a booth thinking, man, there's fear there. And there's not a lot of understanding of how to approach those systems, where I came from the mechanical side, as Mike does. And we approach things a little bit differently. So in about 2016, we're talking about a company, Aztec, who developed a remote system that allows the shop to take our device and plug it into the car and connect to a factory tool so that we can help them scan the vehicle remotely, and they don't have to have that investment in the factory tool to ensure that we're gathering all the information we need to gather from the vehicle. Because when the collision industry entered into the side of scanning vehicles and diagnosing vehicles, it was, they went down the path, obviously, of OEM as the standard. It's the gold standard, and it is. And so making that technology available in a more scalable fashion is where Aztec came into play. And since then, we've added to our suite of services, and we entered into the ADAS world probably 7-8 years ago. And we do that in a variety of ways. We partner with shops like David's and Blue Automotive, where we'll either train the team and provide the remote scan to a connection, or we'll partner with them in running an operation in partnership with them. So we have the ability to do those things.
Mike, what equipment and training are needed to diagnose or repair or recalibrate the ADAS system or a component on the system?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So it's a lot of equipment. Most manufacturers at least have one or two tools that you're going to need outside of just the diagnostic tool. Depending on the manufacturer, when you look at Honda, there's a whole suite of tools that you need. As far as training, some manufacturers do offer training. We just got, not just got, but Ford has offered training to the aftermarket on ADAS systems. A few other manufacturers have offered it to us for a while now, but that's a challenge in and of itself, right? And I think the aftermarket does a very good job of that. I think Chris used to lead up CTI, and there's a lot of aftermarket training, but it is incredibly challenging. You need to be a specialist on whatever brand you're gonna service. You need to know the brand, you need to know the scan tool, you need to know codes and diagnostics and a little bit of that. And then beyond that, you need to know how to use a string and tape measure, which, funny enough, a lot of us struggle with switching over to a metric tape measure. So that's a little bit of a learning curve for some people.
Got to do a little math.
Yep.
All
But
right.
it's a different set of diagnostics as well. Though we're looking at trying to figure out a calibration failure, and that can be challenging. It's not the typical diagnostics you'd be used to, or that we've been used to when we were checking engine sensors and things like that.
I think the other thing you need to keep in mind is you need to read and follow service information, OE service information. And I think the struggle that a lot of techs have is in other services that they've done on vehicles, they've learned how to do it, and they never refer back to the service information again because I've already done it. I know how to do that job. I can do that brake job. On ADAS, you need to refer to service information on every car, every time. You may have done a Camry just a day ago, and now you have another Camry in the bay doing the same calibration. You better look at service information because it may have changed.
Yep.
So you need to read and follow instruction, and that's sometimes hard for people to do.
Oh, it's very difficult. That's kind of
Christmas morning.
Yeah, you feel like you're not adequate if you actually read the directions. It'll be a big red tag in a box when you buy something, and no, I don't need that. So great point, Chris. Thank you very much.
You know, I think we put all this equipment up behind us to really kind of highlight what all is needed. Like there's so many different pieces to the puzzle as you're trying to, work on these cars. It's not one board or one trihedral that fits all, right? Like there are a multitude of things that go in this investment for shops to do it and to do it right? Yep. Just because the light's not on the dash doesn't mean it's working like it's supposed to.
Yep. And not all of them are the same.
Right.
There's manufacturers that build these targets and trihedrals, and they're not all built the same. And so you've got to make sure that they've been validated. That's one thing my research and development team does is take the Subaru target, the Mosaic target that you see behind Aaron. There's a variety of manufacturers that make that target, and many of them are not accurate. And so you've got to make sure that the shop that you're taking your car to is using the right target so that the car is calibrated the right time, or the first time.
Is any of the validation that you guys are doing published anywhere? Like, can we see that?
It's not published, but our customers, when we assist in a calibration, the one thing that we ask right up front, or you submit, is which calibration rig you're using. So we know which ones are validated. We also have your inventory in our system, so we know what you have.
Okay.
But then we can provide the measurements to make sure that it's set up correctly.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have that all cataloged. We have a huge database of high quality images with color analysis done on each one of those. That one's got a lot of data to it because of the complexity of that target. But we know the size and the physical nature of that target as well as the contrast and colors with standard lighting behind it. So it's a lot of work to do that.
So and I was going to jump right into it. I know with this you guys have a new pricing agreement with Geico, and the price for Volkswagen calibrations is I think $600, somewhere around there. And that was a big hit to companies like us because we bought the correct tooling, which is incredibly expensive. You take that same calibration to a Volkswagen dealer, and that's a $1,500 to a $3,000 calibration. But now with this price fix that you guys have set up with Geico is going to come to us and say, when you're doing that calibration, you need to pay we can only pay you $600. Well, that's not even half of what a reasonable charge, even at a dealership or for somebody like us to do it. What are you doing with your shops to get the shops that you work with? How are you getting them to be able to make a living with that $600 calibration or $650? I don't recall exactly what it was.
Well, I was not involved in setting up the pricing, so I can't comment on the pricing. And you know me, I'm going to give you the facts and the truth based on what I know. I can tell you that our pricing is probably based on scale. We do thousands of calibrations a day. And the way we serve on the calibration side is usually one of three ways, maybe even four. We have our own calibration centers. We have a couple of those, but that you set aside. We do a lot of remote calibrations where we help set up virtually.
And Chris was mentioning a few things about the pricing with Aztec.
Yeah, I think Mike's question was around a premium calibration like an Audi. And I associate things like that with a lot on the mechanical side as a third-party warranty or an extended warranty. But David deals with this daily and probably has some comments that he can make around how he manages pricing with our deal.
Yeah. So, I think as an industry, as we're trying to deal with, is everybody understanding their role in what they do, right? So Aztec's role in the pricing piece of what they've published is probably about 20% of the 80 of what we have to do in a calibration. So on the collision repair shop, it's, we have to go in and set everything up, and we have to put the targets up. We have to do the measurements. So all of that labor, and just like Mike said, I mean, to do an Audi is not a $600 or $700 ordeal, right? Like it's $1,500, $1,800, $3,000 to do an Audi because there's so much equipment, there's so much setup, and so just understanding Geico's role, I think, is Aztec's role in the position of calibrations is what everybody needs to understand. It's not just Aztec. It's there's multiple other companies out there that are doing the same thing.
Sure.
But it's everybody understanding that technician that's on the ground, just like Mike's guys that work remotely. Like those guys have a lot of invested training. They're the ones that are actually doing the work.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions. So when we're on the topic of Audi, Volkswagen, the equipment to do all of the ADAS calibrations for Audi, Volkswagen, not including the alignment rack, I added that up the other day. It's $53,000, right? It's a big investment. One of the things that I think people neglect, if you're going to do these, you alluded to reading service procedures. Every Audi, Volkswagen front radar, not every one of them, but most of them, in the beginning of that procedure, will tell you that you have to use their specific tools. So we have a lot of companies that come out here and say, well, this one target board will work for all of them. And we know that Audi Volkswagen sells 2 target boards for both radars, and they make every dealership, if you're going to be an Audi Volkswagen dealer, you're going to do calibrations, you have to purchase 2 of those tools. Our engineers decided there's something different in these 2 tools, and we have to purchase them. So if I'm going to perform safety repairs, and again, that front radar on that vehicle is going to control the steering and braking and acceleration of that vehicle. If I'm going to do that procedure, and I can't neglect to read the top of that procedure that states I need that special tool, which again, all that equipment is incredibly expensive. So to bring it to somebody like us and for us to either perform the procedure correctly or take shortcuts to meet that $650 price point that Aztec can set up with Geico, there's no way. I assume. David, you guys are doing a high volume. Could you justify a $53,000 investment at $650 when your techs are spending, 3 hours to set that thing up? And
no, there's a lot of explanation that we have to give, right, and go through those procedures and really itemize it out of what everybody's role is in that billing piece. Like you said, with Audi, you got to do, you got to have the alignment machine. Anytime an Audi or Volkswagen's in a collision, Audi tells you, Volkswagen tells you, you have to do an alignment. But when you do that alignment, it can sometimes require you to do other calibrations, right? So knowing that you got that luxury car comes with sometimes a luxury repair, right? So,
and I think that's our concern is I feel like it's a race to the bottom. If we're setting this $600 price point for a job that's $1,500 at the dealership, by making that deal with Geico, I feel that you guys have forced the hand of people. They're going to have to perform this calibration incorrectly. They're going to have to cut corners. They're going to have to use incorrect tooling. That's why, and I'm grateful you guys are here today. I wanted to know what your guys' thoughts was on that.
Well, that's not the intent at all. Again, I'm going to leave the pricing conversation to those that want to comment about the pricing side of things. Our intent is to ensure that we're making a safe, proper, and complete repair on every car. That has never changed. It's always been that way. And when we have exceptions like an Audi, I think there's, to David's point, there's a role that we all have to play to make sure that, number one, the vehicle's calibrated properly. Number two, how do we manage and navigate the paying side of the equation? How do you get paid? How does the customer get the car back in a pre-collision state or better, operating the way it was designed to operate? And how does the customer come out whole? At the end of the day, in certain kit situations, a shop is going to have a conversation with a customer about there's a gap, and that gap needs to be covered. And in situations where it's a high-end car, it's an A8. The A8 was always used as kind of the example of, oh, hell, this is going to be hard when ADAS first started, because it can turn into a day job or a day and a half job because of all the calibrations that can go on. And I don't think the intent of the pricing was to cover those outlying issues. Those types of vehicles and those types of situations need to be managed individually.
Well, I think, the whole fixed pricing thing is definitely it shook the industry up. It's caused a lot of noise and a lot of conversation. Your president of your company came out yesterday and wanted to, explain your position and what was going on. And he said shops are more profitable today because of that. And I can add both ways. And so when originally that price was $737.50 is what Aztec's price was, and today is $650. That math in my head goes backwards.
Yeah.
So to tell a shop that they're more profitable making less money,
Yeah.
I just would love to know that economic package that he's got.
That comment was made, and I had talked to him about it last night. And the comment was supposed to be, some shops are more profitable, not all shops are more profitable.
Okay.
And a new program like this, well, I'll apologize right up front that we did a poor job of communicating this as an organization. We needed to do better in the way we communicated it and launched the program. We launched it quickly and not in a well-planned manner. So I'll stand up and say, I'm sorry for that. But at the end of the day, we've got to take care of the customer and take care of you. We know who the customer is. The motor pays all of us. They pay every single salary in this room. And so I don't lose sight of that. You can look at my LinkedIn byline, and my mission in life has always been helping our customers take exceptional care of their customers. And at the end of the day, we believe that. When it comes to where we're moving forward, we'll have individual conversations with shops to help them make sure, like we have with you. I mean, you and Andy fight every day over the phone. I know that. But that it's our industry and our companies are run by people. And if we create relationships and we're respectful with each other, we'll solve this problem. We'll come to terms with it.
Very good. Okay, why don't we jump over here and get one of our questions that we had?
Well, actually, we had a couple questions pop up. The second one that popped up is a little more relevant to right now. So
We'll go with it first then.
okay, it's actually, well, now I have four chat bubbles from the same person. So I'm gonna, I don't know how you want to break these up. Okay, so if Aztec is telling insurance their sublet pricing for the services in a shop, now insurance feels the shop setup, labor, the shop setup, labor, and equipment is included. Please clarify.
Well,
And then, or you want to break it up?
Yeah, we can break it up.
Okay.
It depends on the arrangement we have with the shop. I mean, with David's shop, obviously he's setting up. We're doing the remote connection to the scan tool.
Yeah.
We have arrangements with shops where we have an in-shop tech, and that tech does the calibration setup and connects to the factory scan tool using our technology and runs the scans. And so, or if it's brought to one of our calibration centers, we are doing everything. So I believe it depends on the relationship that we have with the shop. Now, I'll clarify that. I don't know what that agreement that was entered into really contains along that lines, because I wasn't involved in that. So if I'll take that question back and get an answer for the audience and convey it back to you.
Now, there's definitely specific wording in there that additional labor and stuff have to be negotiated,
Yeah.
right? Like that's clear in that document. So I think it's back to like just understanding like everybody's role. Like Aztec's role is just to connect to the car and do the software. The labor is something completely separate, and it's not part of that price.
Yeah. As well as other things, other steps that you might take within the whole process. That line is meant to exclude that so that you can have that conversation with the carrier.
But that's where I think this issue is that it was negotiated with Geico. So Geico is going to come to a shop like David, or they're going to come to a company like us and say, Aztec charges $225 for a dynamic calibration, and that's all you're going to get. And if you look at, so and the big issue with that, quite frankly, is that you look at so for the listeners listening, you have static calibrations where we'll place a target in front of the vehicle. We'll use that target to realign that radar. We also have dynamic calibrations. So when we refer to dynamic, that means that we're going to drive the vehicle, and the components on the vehicle are actually looking at things like stop signs and things, trees on the side of the road, road markings, things like that. And especially when it comes to front radars, which is pretty common, that's what we're seeing in collisions, is the radar may be shifted. So those dynamic calibrations, most of them need to be vertically aligned before you put it in the road and do a dynamic. And the reason behind that is that we can see things easily to the left and the right of the vehicle, but you're not going to necessarily be able to drive under a bridge where that component can realign itself vertically, right? So with that, a lot of those dynamic procedures require removal of the bumper. And I think I'm assuming all of you guys have spent enough time in collision shops to know that if insurance tells us they're only going to get paid $225 to do the calibration, because that's the price that Aztec set with Geico, we pulled up a 22 Ford Edge earlier, and the labor time for that is 1.8 hours just to remove the front bumper, which you need to do to access that radar, and then you take a physical measurement of it, reinstall the bumper. That's 1.8 hours. And what's your mechanical rate, David?
It varies. Right now it's roughly, our walk-in rate's $140 an hour. Okay,
so at $140 an hour, that's a $252 job just to remove and reinstall that bumper, right? So I guess Aztec can say, well, we're only billing for the function, but the problem with that agreement is that now Geico is going to come to us and say, we're only going to pay you $225. And we all know what's going to happen is that, unfortunately, there's going to be collision repairs out there that aren't going to level that radar. And I can tell you from knowledge and experience that if that radar is not leveled, just because you got a green screen on your Aztec box, it doesn't guarantee that that vehicle's safe. Would you guys agree with me? So I think that's the issue that we've created, is we are feeling forced now because of this agreement, because of things that we've already been struggling with, that now we know that these vehicles simply aren't going to get repaired properly. And I think that's a big concern. And like I said, I'm grateful you guys came here and gave us an opportunity to address that, because I think this is critical. I think consumers need to be aware of that. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed and needs to be discussed. So I wonder if you had any thoughts.
Well, I think, the labor piece of it, I think the biggest problem with the pricing menu fixture is there was no conversation with the actual people doing the job, right? Like, you didn't have a seat at the table, I didn't have a seat at the table. All this stuff came out, and I think that's where it kind of went sideways. Like, there needs to be more conversation about what all does it take to do it. Just like the dynamic you were talking about. Yeah. Aztec has a price for that. You plug the device up, they set it in the calibration mode, but the shop still has to have somebody that goes and drives that car. You have to find the road with the right marking, right? We have to make sure that we have coverage as that person's driving the car, that if something was to happen, God forbid, while they're doing that, that they're covered. That there are all those expenses that have to be factored in, and there has to be labor charges for that. So to say this is one set price, I think that's where it just went sideways. And I think it's not only for Aztec. There are other companies out there that are rolling out these same things that, just to be fair, it's not just you guys. I know you guys race to the front to figure out who to put out there first, but I think that's where the mistake's at.
Well, I think that to your point, it entails more than just the connection of the tool, et cetera. And it's that the pricing that you're talking about is not far from what we've been doing for many years. And that function of the physical alignment of the sensor or the removal of the bumper, all of those things have always been there. We're not doing those from remote location. We haven't figured out how to do that, reach through.
Don't have a robot there yet.
and do that. So none of those things have changed. So, that from my perspective, not having been at the table in the conversations, none of that changed. And how the pricing relates to that, again, I'll go back and get an answer to that and respond back to the audience.
But what we're hearing on our end is from insurers is Aztec will do a dynamic calibration for $225. And you and I both know in order to properly do the front radar cruise control alignment on that Ford we talked about, you have to remove and reinstall the bumper. Nobody can realistically do that, pay a technician labor, use the proper tools at $225. And that's the big concern, is an Aztec calibration, in my opinion, is not the Ford cruise control alignment. And I think that's the big concern. And I think, I don't know if you would agree with that, but for $225, whatever Aztec calls that dynamic calibration isn't the proper service, right?
We're not doing the physical part of it in the shop, obviously. We're doing the remote part of it with the scan tool.
But that's kind of the concern, is so we're calling that a calibration, but we're not doing a whole calibration. So essentially Aztec can bill Geico for what they call a dynamic calibration, but they're not able to do the steps, as you alluded to, remotely removing the bumper and leveling it. But we set that pricing saying we are doing a dynamic calibration on this Ford radar. That's what I don't understand, is how can we say we're doing the procedure? How can we bill for that procedure? How can we set a price for it if you can't actually do the full procedure? That's my big concern.
Chris, two things. Carol Proctor, Collision Shop on this area. One, as he alluded to just then, when y'all set a price or put a price out there, just as we deal with P-page issues sometimes, that becomes the perception, the consumer and sometimes the insurance personnel, that that's the price, when in fact it's not the price. And I've read through y'all's information, and it's not very clear. As he said, y'all are putting the price out there, and people are going, well, that's the price, and that's how I'm going to get paid. And I don't know that Aztec had the right to do that.
Before we closed out that first hour, Carol Proctor, AC Proctor Paint and Body, he had a question that he was asking Chris, and we're going to go ahead and pick up where we left off there. Carol, could you mention your question again?
And it was more of, I was commenting about the pricing structure and the second part of it, and I don't know if it was a question as much as it was a statement about it. Chris, you made a comment earlier about that there's a gap and that somebody's got to recognize that they've got to fill in the gap to make it whole. Well, at the end of the day, this entire process is about putting a safe car back on the road at a reasonable price. The customer, the consumer, the person that's responsible for all of us being here, their expectation is if there's a figure, whatever that figure is in the estimate, that's the figure. And if we start going, well, hey, Mr. and Miss Consumer, there's a gap and you got to fill it in, is that fair to the customer? I mean, whatever the price is to fix that car, fair and reasonable, the customer shouldn't have to step up and pay that gap.
Well, I don't know that I can answer the question one way or the other.
Well, no, you said there's a gap, and the customer may have to fill it in.
Yeah, I agree that there are times where there's a gap when there's a third payer. There's always the potential for a gap. That happens in medicine. That happens at the dentist. That happens.
Well, let's be honest. On car repairs, the consumer's expectation of the gap in deductibles is totally different than what it is on a hospital visit or a doctor's visit. I mean, customers expect they're going to have to pay. But when a customer gets their car fixed, their expectation is the insurance and the deductible, that's it. Am I right, David?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely changing. It is definitely, that's the expectation of the customer. I don't know if we're headed in that direction as an industry. Is that going to be the new standard that, your coverage is only going to cover so much and you're going to be out of pocket, the difference. It's
if that's
scary.
the case, it has not been expressed to the consumer.
Right.
Now, this recent storm we've had with 2% deductibles and stuff like that, I think all of us have gotten a little bit of lesson in things that insurance companies will do as far as it. But I know on cars, dealing with them on a day-to-day basis, there's no expectation from a customer that there's a gap for a covered operation that the insurance company is supposed to fully indemnify the claim, that the customer should be picking up anything other than their deductible.
It's hard enough to explain betterment on a wearable part that they don't want to pay the full price on. So,
right. So I don't think I have the knowledge base or the ability to address that any further than I have, but I will take that question back to our team and try to provide a better response than I can give.
I think there's just, just needed clarity on the roles everybody has.
Sure,
I think that's the biggest problem and the gap.
And I think that's the main thing we're trying to do here is get together, communicate a little bit better, and make those decisions. Is this something that a consumer would need to change their perception of what the insurance will pay, what they won't pay? And of course, like Chris mentioned, that's fairly common in the medical field. It may end up being something in the automotive field, but if there's ways around that.
Well, I think part of the gap can be that, but I think also the gap is just understanding what the roles to David's point is. In the case of Mike's example on the Ford, we're not going to remove the bumper. We're not going to do the physical alignment of the sensor. Somebody else is. That has to be added to the cost of the repair. Obviously, I mean that gap in understanding or communication is where I think we need to solve more than anything. And to your point, we've got to go back and come back with a better
Sounds like just
explanation of that.
good communication would possibly solve a lot of issues, Mike.
Well, and to be honest, I feel like, quite frankly, I think Aztec has misled the insurance agency in a lot of ways in that way. It's like you mentioned, it's you guys aren't performing the entire calibration. We talk about seat weight sensors, right? And for the listeners, seat weight sensors are normally in just the passenger seat, sometimes in the rear of the vehicle, and these help prevent or cause an airbag deployment. We don't want the airbags to deploy if your book bag's in the passenger seat of the vehicle, right? But if your child is, there's a threshold of weight in that seat, and we need to know that weight so that the airbags can deploy and somebody is safe in a collision. And a lot of manufacturers require, if you figure you have something in a seat, that car's in a collision, you've got a bunch of little scales in that vehicle. Those scales may become uncalibrated, and if they're not calibrated within a few pounds, that could be life or death of somebody's children if the airbag doesn't deploy. So that's a very big piece of what our company does. We talk about ADAS calibrations, right? But we're doing a lot of other safety systems that people don't really pay much attention to. And seat weight sensor calibrations are one of those. And I know that Aztec has told its insurers, I think across the board, that they are performing seat weight sensor calibrations along with post scans, which is really frustrating for us because, one, that's a totally separate service. But the other frustrating part of that is most manufacturers require a process that includes putting weight on the seats, taking measurements, and going through and making sure that vehicle's safe. And I happened to sit through, I watched an Aztec yesterday where they essentially wrote an invoice, said that they did an operations check. Honda calls that procedure an output check. Their documentation said output check. There were no weights put on the seat. There were no measurements. There was nothing done professionally the way that procedure was supposed to be done. And the fact of the matter is I'm assuming that's happening at scale, and that's people's lives that are put in danger. And the problem becomes is when Aztec claims to be performing that procedure and they're not. When we go to insurers and we say, look, I know that Aztec post-scanned it and they said they did that procedure, but they really didn't, they don't want to listen to us. And there's nothing I can do. I can't force that shop to let me work on the vehicle. So now that vehicle goes out in an unsafe condition because it wasn't calibrated. And that's the very scary thing. And I think that's the thing that I really wanted to bring up and address is if my company billed Geico for a seat weight sensor calibration and I didn't do it, that's insurance fraud and that's a crime. And I want to ask you, am I looking at that the wrong way?
Well, you may be looking at an outside instance. Our team is trained to do that properly and guide the placement of the weight in that example in the seat. And we're dependent upon them that we trained to do that. Our intent is not to circumvent that at all. And we do call out those seat weight sensor calibrations on supposed to be on every car. So if that's an outlier, I would be like to know about that so we can correct that. Absolutely.
I have it. I mean, and I will say this, I've got a small team, but we don't have the training resources you guys do, but every one of our guys knows that that's a safety system, and
Absolutely.
that's not that would never happen with
Absolutely.
us.
We were talking with David, and David was talking about you could either say rolls or lanes.
Yeah. So we're getting there. We were talking about seat weight sensors again, and so I think there just needs to be clarity. If you guys want to give away pushing the button, that's fine. But the labor to set the seat in the right position, to set it upright, to set the weight in the seat, remove the weight, like all that is done at the shop level by the technician. And there just needs to be clarity on that. Nobody works for free.
Yep.
We're definitely not a non-for-profit business. And so I think there just needs to be, again, you guys got to provide clarity. Next week is probably the best time to do it at SEMA. So hopefully everybody that's there grabs a hold of somebody within your organization and other ones and has those conversations.
Come by the booth and have a conversation.
There you go.
Okay, we had some questions. Jamie, would you read the first question?
Well, I'm going to condense the questions down because they're all within the same thread.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a couple different ones. Mm-hmm. So one is about outsourcing your tech support to Mexico. Is that true?
Outsourcing is the wrong word.
Okay, all right. Well, that was my phrasing, and maybe it was poor.
So we're a global company.
Yeah.
All right. We do have, and this started prior to me arriving, which was 3 years ago this weekend. So we do have a team in Monterey.
Yeah.
Now, you think, okay, why would you outsource there? Well, obviously, the same issues that a shop deals with every day is expenses, and talent is expensive. Now, so we hired graduate engineers from university in Monterey. They're either mechanical engineers or electrical engineers. So they have a really good thought process, problem-solving skills, critical thinking skills, and we onboard them. We started this 3 years ago. We now onboard them. It takes about 8 to 10 weeks to onboard them with the knowledge of what we're trying to do, and they don't jump in and do programming or calibrations out of the gate. They're doing simple scans, a pre-scan on maybe a Toyota initially, and then maybe they move to GM or something of that nature. We have an entire mentoring team there. That's just a segment of our team to handle some North American business. The vast majority of our team is in the U.S., and they're staged, most of them are at home because COVID sent everybody home. And that I remember the operations director saying they went home and we woke up the next morning and it was working. And so our systems would work remotely. Yeah. So nobody came back in the office except some of our Euro guys because we can't virtualize some of the Euro platforms because of the way they work. So there's only a handful of techs that are working in our headquarters. But we have a large group of technicians that work in shop. So they're in a shop, David's is not an in shop, but we'll have a tech in shop that's doing the calibrations and the scanning of vehicles using our technology on a daily basis. And when they don't have something to do in that shop, they're at a desk connected to the cloud, to our technology, and they're performing calibrations or scans or programming events, whatever the case may be.
Well, I think that's again where like the transparency needs to be clearer.
Yeah.
The president came out and he made his little video yesterday. He did his interview and he said, jobs were reduced in the U.S., but it was reduced because of efficiency gains.
And that's true too.
That's there just needs to be clarity in it. Like if you guys reduce jobs, then just say you reduce jobs.
We reduce jobs because of efficiency gains.
So
the
wait
last
times,
riff was that we just have technology that connects the vehicle to our technology faster, and in a more automated way, so that by the time our team gets the job and grabs the job, the car's already paired to our device and ready to go, and in some cases is already run the scan, so that our team is then auditing and reviewing the report, making sure that everything. We grabbed all the modules, those type of things, and that the report is generated in an appropriate way.
Well, I don't think wait times have gotten any shorter. So I would love to see that data. I feel like we wait a lot longer now than we may have.
Our data doesn't show that.
Right.
But yeah.
So,
if you are, we need to take that to heart and consider that.
Yeah, and one concern I have, we know that vehicle networks are vulnerable. There's a lot of security measures put in place. Did the consumers have any idea, or did even your clients, which are collision shops, did they have any idea that you guys were sending that data out of the country?
It's not going out of the country. It's not going out of the country.
Okay.
The communication between our tool and the vehicle is in North America. It's in the U.S. They're ported into our center in Plano. Or in Dallas, and connecting to the tool virtually there. So it's almost like TeamViewer, Michael, if you look at it from that perspective.
So they don't have access to data.
No.
That's good to know.
No.
So I would like to talk about the products.
Okay, so this one we're going to circle back. I got it about 8:30 this morning. Does ADAS require any routine maintenance? And if so, does the vehicle alert the driver or the technician that maintenance is required?
I'll take that one. So generally speaking, no, but there is a little bit of maintenance in keeping a clear windshield. You have cameras behind the windshield.
Yeah.
Especially you live up north, you get snow on your front bumper. That's going to affect the system. So believe it or not, maintenance is actually cleaning your vehicle now. But generally, there's not much service. You're not going to bring it in an oil change, and they're generally not going to inspect it. The systems are always learning and always checking themselves. So if something happens, you're worried about maybe a shopping cart hitting it in the grocery store and it mislines that radar. Unfortunately, you may not know, and eventually it'll hopefully set a light. But it's making sure you use the system, and if it acts funny or it doesn't operate the way you know it's supposed to, then definitely bring it in for service.
Yeah, I'd just add if you've been in a situation where the bumper's scratched or dinged in a corner, and you think I'm just going to drive the car, I'm not going to take it in and get it fixed.
Yeah, that's
probably damaged the system.
So
great point.
How should a consumer know where the best place to take a vehicle? Is there a certification that you guys have? Or is it listed on a website? How do they know that they're not going to take it to some backyard guy that's not really going to do what they're supposed to be doing? I'm just, it's just like a general hand flap.
Yeah, no, there's ASE has an ADAS certification, which is pretty well done, and it's starting to get some traction within the industry. So I'm a big proponent of ASE. I think there are some other miscellaneous certifications out there, but if you ask me, my opinion, ASE certification is the one you want to look for.
Yeah, there's some iCar certifications.
iCar's got a little bit of training on it, but so.
Yeah.
Let's see. There's one. If vehicles are supposed to be safer nowadays, why does their insurance premium keep going up and up and up?
That's
But
inflation.
that's it's
That's a you one, right?
Yeah.
Vehicle.
Well, I mean,
components are
if you
becoming
look
more
at it, right, like
expensive.
accidents, I mean, there's studies showing that accidents are reducing due to some of these safety systems, but the problem is that it's more expensive to fix those. So
Yeah.
the cost of repairs are going up. So when you have cost of repairs going up, premiums are going up to overcome that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the complexity of the vehicle isn't just the safety systems; it's the vehicle in general. The suspension systems are more, they're not more robust; they're more sophisticated, and they break easier and they're more expensive.
well, you get some headlights now
yeah,
that
oh my
are. I mean,
gosh.
a headlight, 15, 20 years ago might have been a couple $100.
Yep.
You can get a headlight today that's $2,000.
Yeah.
Easy.
So
And then you have to program it.
yeah.
Let's see. Do it yourself person.
There is no DIY in fixing ADAS.
Okay, so it has to go to a certified shop. There's nothing you can do.
No, I mean you've got to have the electronics. You got to have the targets. You've got to be able to get into the car. It's not going to AutoZone and saying, "Hey, clear my codes on my car so it works." Like you've got to be able to get in there with OE software and actually work on this stuff.
The hand scanner is not going to pull
The
up
hand
anything
scanner.
related to this.
And do not have somebody calibrate your systems outside, in your driveway, on the street, in a parking lot. It's not going to be done correctly.
Well, I think
Yeah,
that's
that's
some of
a
the
big thing.
misconception right now that consumers have. How many windshields are replaced across the country, right? And everybody sees these ads that are online that are advertising, "Hey, we can replace your windshield, and then we can calibrate your car." And you see it being done outside, and we all know it's wrong.
Yeah.
And with some of those calibrations, when you replace a windshield, there's got to be an alignment done, right? How many times have you taken your car to a one of those glass facilities and they do an alignment on your car when they give it back to you? So then they haven't done it right. So then the consumer doesn't know that because again, the majority of folks are just looking to make sure there's not a light on the dash, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't see a light, you think everything's working fine, but that camera could actually be aimed
Off
in
in
the
the woods,
in the
yeah.
opposite lane of traffic, or like Mike said, it could be up at a bridge, and it's not telling you anything's wrong.
Yep.
So the consumers really got to get involved with the shops that are working on it, where you're going to get it done. The importance of glass is super critical. The fire marshal that was here that looked at our building, he had a brand new Ford, and he had his windshield replaced by one of these large companies that comes to you and they do it, and they put an aftermarket glass in it. He went 2 to 3 weeks trying to get his car because it was malfunctioning all over the place, and it was all due because they put an aftermarket glass in the car, and the camera couldn't see out of it.
Yeah.
So it's super important.
David,
for that
is there
consumer.
things that a consumer can ask for? Let's say that this vehicle had to be recalibrated. Let's say a windshield was put in the vehicle. Is there paperwork that a consumer can ask for to say, "Hey, my car was calibrated correctly"?
I think that's always a good thing. I think it's good to ask that shop that's fixing your car to provide you with the documentation, whether it's for the alignment or the calibration, to validate what was done, right? Ask for the scan report. Ask for what tools were used. It's very important from every manufacturer, if you look at it, and we can lead into product and talk about this for Aztec, that OEM tools are what the manufacturers say to program their car. Majority of them have it very clearly stated of what they want out there. Now, Aztec does have, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this, Chris, is there is 3 different options, right? You got an OE, you got an OE compatible, which I'm very interested to learn the language on that one, and then unverified, right?
Right.
So if you want to, everybody knows what an OE scan is. That's pretty simple. What's a OE compatible?
So let's go through all 3 of them.
Okay.
Because I think it's important to understand the difference, because it's the most misunderstood part of our business. Because it gets tied into our rules engine, and those two get mushed together, and they think they're the same thing. They aren't. So an OE scan is using the tool that the manufacturer built or had built with their software on board that scan tool. It used to be a dedicated device. Now 99% of them are PC based, and that software was built based on the specs that the engineers provided. It's been validated against every single controller and module that they have in all of their vehicles. That takes a lot of work and a lot of time. So the software's been validated to communicate and ask questions of the controllers on board the vehicle and can interpret the answers in return correctly. Okay? So scan tools aren't magic in a box. There's simply a computer asking another computer or a module a question. Send me your codes. Do you have any problems? Send me the information and interpret it so that the technician can see them and report. So we take that same tool that Michael has in his van. You've got factory scan tools and connect some car side. We connect those through a long extension cable using our patented technology, which is, we akin it as, a 3,000 mile extension cord plugged into the car. And our patents are around the timing of those packets of data coming back and forth so that it results in the same thing. So factory scan tools is the gold standard, right? We were explaining the difference in our products, our scans. So we talked about the OE factory scan being the gold standard. A lot of questions about our what we call OEM compatible scans. And people say, what does OEM compatible mean? That's a marketing term that we fought over internally for probably half a year as we were putting this together. So let me define it for you. Several years ago, and even probably a year before I got there, which was 3 years ago, the question in the industry was always, what's the difference between a factory tool and an aftermarket tool? And Mike and I can tell you there's a lot of differences between those two tools, depending on the tool and depending on the car. And so really from the context that we were being asked, it was around pre-scans, post-scans, doing a health check on the vehicle. And so our company decided to try to answer that question. We have a large investor of ours that has the largest inventory of modern technology vehicles in salvage yards globally. You can figure out who that is. Cleanly organized. We have access, and we put a bunch of vans with technicians in them with factory scan tools, with our technology, and primarily the rectangular old Gen 2 device. We still use that in the field. And a bunch of aftermarket scan tools. And, the aftermarket tools that we thought were the better tools out there, the most common tools. And to the public, that's not going to mean anything to you, but, we could name them off, but I'm not going to. And we put these guys in the yards and we started testing vehicles. And the way we tested them was we connected factory tool directly to the car. We had battery support on the cars. We had hotspots because there's no Wi-Fi in the middle of those salvage yards. So we were stress testing there, but they were dedicated hotspots. And so we connected the factory tool and we ran a health check, an all module scanner pre-scan. And we gathered that data. And then we connected that tool, or connected our tool, and we ran a factory scan with a factory tool that's in our data center in Dallas on that vehicle. And we set that report into the database. And then we ran a local scan with every aftermarket tool that we had. And I think we had up to 7 or 8 when we first started. And it was pretty apparent pretty quick which ones were just failing the grade. And they got tossed to the side because there's no use testing them much further because they were never the same or rarely the same. And as we did this, we tracked every year, make, model VIN that we did, or trim that we did. And over the last 4 years, we've captured about, it's a couple thousand or more. I don't know the exact number, probably 2,500 or more year, make, model, trim combinations of vehicles we've scanned. And we've scanned them multiple times. And it's not one vehicle that we've scanned. We've scanned multiple of those trims, and we've gathered that data. And so we have this hundreds of thousands of scans in a database that we can now use to compare the scan results. And so we take now we're relating to our tool that we produce today, our all-in-one. That's our aftermarket scan tool that has the ability to connect to our factory tools and do an OEM scan, OEM remote scan, but it also has the ability to do a local aftermarket scan. But we call a aftermarket scan an OEM compatible scan if the results are exactly the same. And by exactly the same, I mean the same base code and the same failure type, the extended code, and if it's delivered twice because the OE delivers it twice, the aftermarket tool has to deliver it twice because sometimes the code comes down in different areas of the report. And if it's the same, then we'll identify that as an OEM compatible scan, and it's an option for the shop to be able to choose that scan as for their pre-scan. The OEM scan can still be chosen. And so we have an OEM, which is the factory scan, the aftermarket scan, which we validated against that. And then if we haven't validated it, or we've checked it and it doesn't pass as the same, that's an unverified scan. So that'd be a scan that we either don't know it's going to return the same thing, or because we haven't tested it or haven't tested it enough, or we have not tested it, and so we just don't know, right?
So do you feel like optional was OE compatible? Using that language, do you feel like that's deceiving to the consumer? Because it's an aftermarket scan tool. That'd be like us saying an aftermarket fender that we put on a car is an OE compatible fender that we put on there, right? And I mean, there's an organization called Kappa that certifies fenders, right? And hoods and different things. You guys claim that that OE compatible tool has been certified equivalent to the OE.
Not the tool. Not the tool.
Okay.
The result of
So who did the qualification? Who did the certification?
We did.
Okay, so you self-certified.
We self-certified. So it's our tests and our data bounced against the factory tool. And what we're saying is that the health check run with that tool is going to return the same results as a directly connected factory tool on that year, make, model VIN or trim, not on every car.
Okay. So it's hard for me. It's, probably other collision shops out there to hear that you guys are allowed to self-certified, and this is what's okay by the insurance carriers or what's promoted when, we have to go out and we have to get ICAR certified, or our technicians have to get welding certifications to be part of OEM programs. You have to get certified by those OEs, but Aztec has their own self-certification. So that's kind of a problem for me, and I feel like it's a misconception to consumers to say you're OE compatible.
I think the term certified is probably the abused word in this case. So and we could call it qualified. We've compared that test result on that car to the OE tool, and we're just saying that tool is going to return the same result. So that makes choice.
Is any of that data published where the vehicle owners or the people using? So and I hate to say it, but it doesn't sound very methodical or science. It's like we sent a bunch of vans to junkyards to scan.
It was done very scientifically.
But I'm not. Maybe it was, but why don't we? Why wasn't the public able to see that?
I think there just needs to be a secondary company that validates what you have, right? There just needs to be an outside service that comes in and validates what you do. I mean, when we get certified as shops for OE manufacturers, they send a third party in to come and inspect our locations, to look at the tools that we have and validate that. They don't just take us at our word. So I think, to be able to claim that you're, certified, and that's the wording that's in there. It's OE compatible. It's an aftermarket scan. Let's just call it what it is. And the manufacturers are very specific on the tooling that's required to use on their cars, and it's their recommendation. And then we'll get into the rules engine that's developed. And the rules engine is basing the rules on what Aztec believes, right? And and what your recommendations are. Does it provide Aztec's recommendations?
It can.
Okay, so does Aztec believe that their recommendation is equivalent or equal to the OE's?
On a certain year, make, model trim that we validated.
David?
I think we're going to have to do a part 2 to this series. Like this is going way too
part
too
2
much.
would be good.
That's great. So, again, back to OE compatible. I just, it's an aftermarket scan tool. I think that just needs to be owned.
Yeah, I own it.
And I think it's misconceiving to consumers. We can't list it on an estimate as OE compatible, right? It's an aftermarket scan. That's exactly what it is. If you read the manufacturers, they have recommendations, right? And so shops are being told to use the rules engine to help with making these decisions in car repairs, right? And what's the best scan tool? There's a couple different scenarios you guys use, but the one that really frustrates me is it says, what's the best economical choice? And so I don't know where economics plays a factor in when you're trying to look at a safety system on somebody's car. That economics shouldn't play that factor in doing the right thing for the consumer, right? And putting that family. I wouldn't want a $3 scan tool to scan my personal car and put my wife in the road when I knew the one that cost $100 is what needed to be done to make sure the safety systems were working right. So, I think I have issues with that, and I think the consumers do too, and the shops. And Aztec is taking the stance on this OE compatible tool, and so if you want to.
So we're not taking the stance that OEM compatible should replace OEM.
Okay.
OEM compatible is the result of our research that has identified the instances where our aftermarket scan tool will return the same information to the technician, to the body shop, so that they can diagnose or service that vehicle appropriately. So if I ask you a question as an OEM scan tool and you give me an answer, and somebody else asks you a question that's not an OEM scan tool, they're a compatible question, the question's asked in exactly the same way, has to, because the controller only understands a certain language. The engineer coded it to understand a certain phrase, and it responds in that, and the result is the same. Then the information the technician has in front of them to make a decision about a repair or cause or an issue or a concern that we need to be worried about to make sure that it's repaired right and is operating right before we return it to the consumer, they have the same information. What I'm going to tell you is that what we did not validate is that data PIDs are the same and it will program the same. It's not the same as an OE scan tool. What we're saying is that health report on that particular VIN will be the same. That's it.
Right,
now,
Chris, y'all did the research on it, right? You said you went to Copart, you ran it against your devices. You had the rectangle device, the Gen 2. Yeah. You had the all-in-one that you ran it on, and this thing got rolled out, right? Like that was the new set of the rules. And
the rules.
So let's talk about that. Okay. Well, that's where the pricing menu that got rolled out. There was OE scans and OE compatible, right? And that became the standard of what was being rolled out. Right. Within the first 3 days of testing of this system, all of a sudden, and prior to that, the Gen 2 was always allowed to run, or always shown as the option to run OE compatible. Mm-hmm. Today, that no longer exists, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so that was found in testing at a facility with live cars, but you guys, again, claim that you did this certification testing, y'all tested it at all these facilities. Why, when it gets into an open market and we actually test this in live data, do we find that again is not the case? It's not true, and you then cut off from the Gen 2, and now everybody has to use the all-in-one, correct, to do an OE compatible scan. Well,
I think that I may not understand your question correctly, but the the reason behind cutting it off on the Gen 2 is because it used a different different aftermarket scan tool. It didn't use the
Right, but it was rolled out.
It was rolled out initially with it. Yeah,
y'all had all this time to test it before you made this agreement, and you came up with this pricing, and y'all validated this tool, and you rolled it out. But then once it goes out and it becomes the standard, there's a proven fact that it wasn't true.
I guess I'm not understanding your question.
The Gen 2 did not work in the capacity that it was sold with the OE compatible scan.
It did. It used the same database, but it used a different back-end aftermarket tool to scan.
Okay.
It used our...
But it provided false data.
It used our blue driver. It didn't provide false data.
It provided data that was not consistent with the OE scan tool.
That's news to me.
Okay. Okay. No problem.
One of the things,
and if it did, that's the reason.
But that's why they blocked
back.
it. That's why they blocked the Gen 2 from being able to run it like that anymore.
So if it was providing inconsistent data, we test all the time, and when a OE manufacturer updates their software, which sometimes they tell us and sometimes they don't, it happens overnight. I'm sure Mike's experienced that. The aftermarket does at times. When we see those updates, we go back and test. And there's instances where we'll pull things back down. I'm not aware of the situation with why the blue driver back end was pulled out of the Gen 2.
Okay.
But I can get an answer to that.
Yeah. I think, and leading into the rules engine,
okay.
Let's talk about the rules engine, right? Like the shops. Now, again, everybody thinks everybody else needs to make the decisions for us of what's best to fix the car. So we're using this technology and the rules engine and the standard setup. I know you guys will talk about it can be customized to the shop and it can do this and that. But if you're just a standard setup and you don't do anything, what rules does it follow?
It has a base set of rules that uses the OEM compatible data and gives you the ability to do an OEM compatible or an OEM.
Right, but it highlights which recommendation you guys have.
Yeah, it'll say recommended on the OEM compatible as the option.
Right.
But you have control, shop owners have control, because the rules engine was designed as a mechanism.
The carriers are following that recommendation, right? And that's becoming the standard.
That I can't answer.
Okay.
I quite frankly don't know.
Okay.
What I do know is the rules engine was designed to give the shop owner control. So you have control of under which circumstances, which carrier, on which cars, which years that you require OEM or you allow OEM compatible. And so I'll give you an example of CIC in July. Okay. In where were we? Denver. And I went, and it's my adopted hometown. I lived there 27 years. Go Broncos! So I like the orange. And we went to Denver, and we heard all about the rules engine or the deal we did with Geico, et cetera, et cetera. And I lost my train of thought where I was going with this, but we'll catch back up. The key is, and I did lose my train of thought. I hate that when that happens.
So let's talk about the comment that was made there. So shops were going to be made whole. So why was that comment made? Do you feel like the agreement that everybody understood that it was a detriment to the collision shops?
No.
Okay, so you just felt like we were going to be made whole for nothing. And to date, what has Aztec done to make shops whole?
So if you are prescribed an OEM scan by the rules engine,
okay,
and you are not reimbursed for that OEM scan, we will make you whole in that. Craig updated me on that last night, and he says that's absolutely true.
Okay. So the rules engine, I know in some scenarios, like with Nissan, Nissan gets
I got my track back soon.
Okay. So Nissan endorses you guys, right? You got that you're going to use the consult, the OEM software to do your scans, right? and that's great. But the rules engine, when you run it on a Nissan, will 100% of the time pull that an OE compatible tool should be used for the shop. How is that in line with the endorsement that you guys got from Nissan? And for Nissan consumers to believe they're trusting their manufacturer to give them direction for the software that needs to be done on their car, and then they endorse a third party to do it. But you guys take that endorsement and use it on an aftermarket scan tool.
So those endorsements are generally made around their certified programs, right?
Now, this is a bulletin that Nissan put out for all pre and post scans and their position on post scanning and
Right.
pre and post scanning on cars.
Yep. And you can set the rule in the system for all Nissans in all situations.
But shouldn't the rule be there if Nissan's telling you and endorsing you guys that you're going to use console?
It's your decision as shop owner to control what your agreements are. And
That
how
doesn't have
you
anything to do with an
interpret that.
agreement. That's got to do with what the manufacturer says to do.
We take a neutral stance, and we're providing two options: one OEM factory scan and the OEM compatible scan. It's your choice in how you use that.
Okay.
So
But we're providing the data, and we're also giving you the ability to adjust those rules. So reach out to customer service at aztec.com. The team will connect you with the ADIS or the rules engine team, and they'll adjust those rules. The example I was going to give you was when we went to Denver. Got back from that meeting, and Devin Wilcox gave me a call. And Devin Wilcox is the program manager for Subaru program. And he says, I need to understand OEM compatible in the rules engine. And I chuckled a little bit because I said, Devin, don't you remember 2 years ago you were a part of my panel at SEMA for the OEM roundtable when I presented the rules engine and OEM compatible to the industry for the first time. He goes, is that what that was about? He says, explain it to me. And so I explained it to him, and he says, who controls the rules engine? Who makes the rules? Who can set the rules? I said, we have that base set. We have to have a base setting in there. But when we provide the tool to a customer, our team is supposed to walk through the rules that you want to implement, and we implement those rules for you. He said, so the shop controls the rules. I said, yeah. He said, so I can put a notice out to my shops and tell them that they need to set their rule for all Subarus from 2004 to current. They're required to do an OEM scan. I said, yeah. I said, but you're going to find that all but 3 are already set that way.
But shouldn't that be the standard regardless if you're a
I can't
certified
make-
shop or not? Right? It's a Subaru car. That's what Subaru's stance is. It shouldn't matter whether you're a certified shop or not on
again,
how you calibrate somebody's car or scan the car.
We don't manage those certifications.
But if your
We're
rules
providing
engine is
a tool.
going to set the standard for shops to follow because they're looking for that to be a guide, should it not provide clear information and clear direction to the shop to be able to make sure they are doing exactly what needs to be done by that manufacturer?
We should be having a clear conversation with you up front when we deliver the tool to you about how it operates and the options that are available to you so that we can set those rules how you want them set.
So big picture, I wanted to kind of step back, and sorry if I'm pulling off of this, but while we're talking about the rules engine, it comes to me, I'm a little bit confused as to the motivation behind and for the consumers listening, right? The manufacturers, Honda manufactures a vehicle and Honda produces a tool, and they say this is what's required to fix your tool, and here's the equipment. You can see some of the equipment back here.
They say it's what's recommended.
Yeah, right.
But then ASTEC recommends something else too.
Yep. And so the appropriate way to fix the vehicle is what Honda creates for that vehicle, right? And we have other companies that create tools. Then you have ASTEC. But what I'm seeing, big picture, and this is where I'm confused, and I'm hoping you can clear this up for me, Chris, is that we developed, your organization has put all this time and effort into trying to bring the value of the scan down low enough, I assume, to appease insurers. I don't know. But bring the cost of the scan down low. But you even mentioned earlier that you only tested the scan portion of the tool. It's safe to say that that's a small part of a repair. You need to look at data. You need to be able to program, which no aftermarket tool can do. And when you're presenting to the insurers, oh, this scan is OE compatible, that does not mean that the tool is equivalent. Nope. It doesn't mean that you can do that. Nope. So to me, big picture, what it looks like, and this is my assumption, I'm hoping you can clear this up, but I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions. We talked about misconceptions on what an OE compatible scan is. We talked about misconceptions of, you guys are telling the insurers that you're doing seatway sensor calibrations are not being done. You're presenting it that you're doing dynamic calibrations, but you're not removing bumpers, and removing bumpers is part of that procedure. So it looks like this, to me, it looks like this whole presentation to convince insurers that these services should be dirt cheap. And I'm sitting in this chair thinking to myself at this moment going, what is the motivation behind it? And the only thing that I can presume is that if you make it so impossible for companies like David to be able to afford the appropriate tools to scan the vehicle, because that's how Honda designed it. Honda has a collision program, Ford has a collision program, and part of that is, here's the tools you need. If you have these tools, you can repair our vehicles. Mm-hmm. If you drive that price down so that they can't afford that equipment, they can't appropriately repair the vehicle, then they have to rely on you because you're the only one who has access, and you can sell them a scan for $45, and that's all that they can afford because they can't afford to pay for that OEM tool. And I'm saying all that as I'm thinking it, and I'm not making any accusations, but is there any – I can't see any other motivation behind misleading insurance companies to believe you're doing a calibration. I can't find any motivation. I don't understand the motivation behind trying to vet aftermarket scan tools when that's a detriment, and I think you would agree to me, is putting aftermarket scan tools in collision shops in place of tools that need to be able to program sensors. They need to be able to code sensors. I'm sure you're well aware of the fact that you can put a Hyundai radar, blind spot radar sensor on a vehicle. It may not have codes, and you can send it out unsafe. That's what's going to happen with an aftermarket tool, because that aftermarket tool doesn't have access to that service, right? So as a whole, we're all looking at this going, what are they doing, and what is the motivation to try and run the cost down and essentially push people out of the industry that are trying to repair the vehicles correctly? And then on top of that, why are we misleading insurers and telling them we're doing calibrations when we're not actually doing them? What is that all about? And are my assumptions incorrect, I guess is my question.
Well, your assumptions are incorrect. Our focus is making a safe and proper repair and return of the vehicle safe to the customer. The consumer has always been our focus. We end up with pressures from our customers, our shop owners, because they're under pressure, and so providing options to them to be able to address those issues. And it's not every shop that's going to take on those options. You're an OE guy. I can tell that. First time I met you, David. But I can tell you're OE centric, and I would agree with that. If I was a shop owner, I would be OE centric. But I would certainly want to understand what's available out there. Our mission is not to go to a carrier and say, "Hey, we can reduce the costs to save you money." That's absolutely not the case.
Well, that's what I was questioning, is what was the motivation?
With doing the deal with the carriers?
Yeah.
The carriers are coming to us and the other suppliers as well, trying to understand why they get a ticket for a calibration on a particular car, and this invoice over here is $1,000 and this invoice over here is $100.
And so but that's the thing that's frustrating to me, because I look at a $650 Volkswagen calibration, mm-hmm. and you look at the Volkswagen dealer doing that for $1,500. Mm-hmm. Their margins are totally different. They work on 100 Volkswagens every single day, mm-hmm. and a collision shop is going to do 1, 2, 3 a week, mm-hmm. right? So it's even harder for them to make a profit, and then you have your company going in and making it impossible. You cannot buy the required equipment that Volkswagen requires and still complete that calibration. The dealers couldn't even do it and make a living, right? You'd put the dealers out of business at that cost. So I don't understand if you say that wasn't our intent. Like, what was the intention of saying, you know what, that's worth $650, and it's all us. There's no labor involved, and you shouldn't buy the tool. That's what we're seeing.
That from my perspective, and again, I was not in the conversations around the dealer the cost. So I don't know what was said, but I can tell you from my perspective and what my team works on, those are not conversations that we have where we're trying to mislead somebody about we do everything. You don't have to have anything but this box and us, and all of that will happen. We train when we do calibration training. Somebody came here and trained your guys when we first set up, I'm sure.
Yeah, we won't go into that.
Okay. It should have been because the implementation team should have come in.
So I have a question that popped up. It's for you two.
Okay.
And it says, my question is for the shops that got into business with Aztec. There are multiple independent qualified providers of these services that you could have done business with. Is the problem with the insurance company or with Aztec, your partner, not coordinating with you on the pricing? And if it's the customer that you're most worried about it, can't you just not work with the insurance companies and say that there is a set pricing for this and work with the ones that understand that there's always a variable involved? And if meeting OEM requirements are the goal, why use aftermarket and used parts? Wouldn't taking the car to the dealership with OEM tools and OEM trained techs really be better? That was kind of a lot in one.
That was a big one.
Yeah. So I guess his question is the problem with the pricing, does it come down to the insurance
the problems with the misconception of what's out there, right? It's OE tools are what needs to be used, but what Aztec is doing in the procedure is the complication of everything. The way it was presented to the industry, that's the problem. Whether we do it internally ourselves and we use Aztec as a support piece, or whether we go and I say, hey, Mike, come work with our team and let's build all of our own OE tools, because that's what we're going to use, and that's what Mike uses on his trucks. And he's not a shop, right? He's working with collision shops like us, and he goes and helps and services them, and he provides that application for folks that aren't able to, have their own facility and have those technicians and have that equipment to be able to do calibrations. So I think it's not about wanting to use Aztec, or I think the pricing piece is the confusion of how it was presented in everybody's role, like I've said a couple of times, of what everybody does in the scenario with that.
I think at the very beginning of OEM compatible, the real base concept was a lot of vehicles weren't getting scanned correctly, repaired correctly, because the shops didn't have OE scan tools. And, to Mike's point, you get an aftermarket scan tool and you're trying to do everything locally. Just, let's be honest, there are a boatload of shops that are sitting there with an Autel scan tool, and they're doing pre and post scans with that Autel scan tool, and that's all they're using.
And there are people using companies like Aztec and Opus that they have those secondary options, and they're using that aftermarket option.
So our take was OEM compatible gave us some level of indication that on a health check, at least we were seeing all the modules, and we're getting reports and DTCs from all the modules, so that you were getting an accurate report up front. Was it going to program and finish the car? No. Never communicated that way, never intended to be communicated that way. It was designed to do an appropriate pre and post scan, code clear, that sort of thing. So that we were at least getting those shops that were not going to do OEM. Should they all do OEM? My opinion, absolutely, because it's the gold standard. But if they're not, and we can get them into using an OEM compatible scan, at least that's a level of completeness in their initial report and their post report before the car gets in the customer's hands again that they didn't have before. There's a level of confidence there that the car's being scanned correctly, and not with an Actron scan tool that you get at the parts store, holding that in your hand and praying that the car's fixed before it goes down the road.
And I think there's good people at Aztec. I think you're a good person, Chris, just having conversation with me today. And, the guys I deal with on a daily, I think they're definitely good individuals that work inside of organizations. I do question leadership within, that could be causing this. And that's just like what you said. You weren't part of the agreement. Now, it is concerning to me that you feel like Aztec's recommendations are equal to the manufacturer, which I just don't see that. You said that a few minutes ago when we were talking about the rules engine and we were talking about OE compatible, that you felt like y'all's recommendation was just equivalent to the manufacturer, which I don't
Our recommendations aren't this. I'm not comparing our recommendation. Our recommendation is made by the technician that's taking the information and recommending what needs to be repaired.
So,
yeah.
But, like your leadership, y'all just got a brand new president, right, at the beginning of the year. His primary background is in insurance, right? He was an insurance director. He'd never done anything in scans and calibrations, but this is the gentleman that's leading the push for you guys. So I think that's concerning for shops and should be concerning for consumers is, if I was a business owner, and Aaron, if, obviously you own a business, you'd want somebody with an automotive background to run your company, not somebody that didn't have a clue about it.
Well, that's even more concerning to me if I think about it. So if we made that deal with Geico and you're from the insurance business, you knew what the fallout was going to be, that the quality repairs wasn't going to be there, that the vehicles weren't going to get serviced properly because it was a race to the bottom. That's even more concerning to me now. And that's the biggest piece of this is the consumers lose out because nobody is smart enough to stop and say, why isn't that bumper getting removed on a dynamic, right? Not smart enough. That's the wrong term. It's just unaware, right? Nobody's reading the service procedures, as you alluded to. And that's just the most mind-boggling piece of this is we knew the second that deal came around that was going to cause incomplete repairs at the bottom all the way up. So that's very concerning.
I really hope that this week at SEMA, you've got everybody from third parties there to carriers there to shops that are there. And I hope there is a lot of great conversation led from this discussion that people can actually come to the table and start to talk about the problem. And let's come up with some real solutions because where we're at today is not the solution forward. And the things that, potentially have to roll out in the future are just going to continue to compound on that. And I think shops are ready to, let's have a conversation. Let's work together. At the end of the day, we're there to fix it for the customer, right? Let's make sure we're making the best decision as everybody at the table to what's best for that consumer.
Yep. I would really encourage anybody that's attending SEMA to come by the booth and have a conversation with the team. We have, I don't know how many people we're taking to SEMA this year, but Craig and Andy will be there as well as 3 or 4 or 5 people in the booth at one time. Come talk to them. Set some time to sit down and have a conversation with the team. We're not trying to hide anything. I think there's a lot of misconceptions and misinformation or communication that, again, we did a poor job of communicating it, and there's still a lot of work to be done to clarify what we're trying to accomplish. Not trying to hide anything from anybody. We're trying to take care of the consumer and get the car fixed so that they're safe.
And I know you apologized at the beginning of everything. And I think that's great. I think everybody in collision needed to hear that from Aztec, an apology. I think even third parties, everybody needed to hear, hey, we're sorry. But, hopefully, and I don't know your opinion, do you feel like Aztec should pump the brakes on this thing? Should stop?
Well,
let's if we know how ugly the baby is now, let's don't continue to make it ugly, right?
I can tell you that I've been getting messages from the team this morning at the first part of the conversation.
Yeah.
I think they have taken that to heart. I think there'll be many conversations happen internally.
I ain't got any text yet. I'm feeling kind
of.
of.
Really? Andy, text David. Make him feel good. He probably thinks it's Saturday and he's getting a day. I'll tell you what Andy's doing right now. He's on a Corvette test drive. That's why he couldn't be here.
Okay.
So we need to, chastise him a little bit for that.
Well, I'll mention the bonus section is about to wind down. One thing that I feel like that came of this is it's very clear that we all need each other.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about not just collision. I'm talking about the mechanical shops, the collision shops, the equipment suppliers, insurance companies. and of course, without question, consumers, we all need each other. I think things like this is very helpful because we share ideas on how to make the process better. We create synergy with each other to get it done. And I think if we could do one thing during this section here is just agree on or have a commitment to communicate more, like what we're doing now. I think this was very healthy for the industry, very healthy for the consumers, because the main thing they want is their car repaired safely, where it will be safe and dependable, and of course at the best price. But primary concern is safety.
Yeah.
So I think
we
this has
definitely-
been good.
Yeah.
We need to do another one.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
All right, we'll make a commitment
Yeah.
to that also, along with the commitment to communicate well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I want to thank you, Aaron, for putting this all together, and thank you, Chris and David, for doing this. I hope it was very productive.
And
Chris,
David,
thank you so much
Yeah.
for
My
coming.
pleasure.
I think it's been more than needed that somebody from Aztec come out and say something. Like you guys have been getting. I mean, if you like to just get punched in the head, like
Well,
I mean, do that. But I'm glad you came out and you got to speak.
At the end of the day, we're all in this together,
Right.
and we all serve the customer. We all serve the motorist. And if we don't talk and we don't communicate, the motorist is going to be confused. Others are going to be confused. You're going to be confused, and that doesn't serve the motorist well. So
I think that's a great note to close it out on. Everyone, the C&C Auto Show will close out the bonus hour that we've had, and we've had a great time. And we'll see you next week on the C&C Auto Show.